Well, hey, Carissa, thanks for joining me today. This is so much fun to give people a little bit of a look behind the scenes about not only Leadr, but also our relationship. So thanks for taking time out to be with me today.
Thanks for having me, Holly. I am so excited to show everybody my favorite meeting of the week.
Oh, she's trying to get brownie points, guys. That's the thing. Well, hey, we are so excited that you are here. If you are joining this webinar today, that means that you care enough about leadership to take time out of your Tuesday to become a better leader, not only for yourself, but also for your team. So we want to hear from you. Throw in the chat, where are you joining us from? So I am in Houston, Texas, where I believe the heat index today was supposed to be over 110 or something insane. So Carissa, you're in Orlando. What's the weather like there? Because we usually have pretty similar weather.
About the same, yes.
Yeah, too hot. That's the answer. That is the answer. All right, well, let's see. Let me close this out so I can see what our chat folks are saying. We've got several raised hands. Throw it in the chat feature there, since we've got over 80 people already logged on today. So throw in the chat. There we go. San Jose, Omaha. Somebody's in San Diego. I wish I was there right now. I'm headed there next week. Can't wait. Cleveland, Prosper, Texas, right there in the greater DFW area. Hey, Callie. Oh my goodness. Look at this. So many people from all over the country. Carissa, this is one of my favorite parts about the work that we get to do here at Leadr is we get to talk to people all over really the world, but definitely across the US. And this is just such a neat example of that. There's Joe, one of our customers, Lexington, South Carolina. That's awesome. Hey, buddy, good to see you. I see so many names on here that I recognize. This is fun. Yeah, Beverly, I feel you. San Antonio, I'm here in Houston. It is hot. Let's hope all of our air conditioners keep up for sure. Well, as everybody else is logging on, continue to throw in the chat where you're joining us from. Today, we are going to focus. This is going to get real practical today, Carissa. Are you ready?
Ready.
We're going to dive in. And I know you and I talk about this a lot, that there's a ton of thought leadership out there. There are endless. I mean, let's look at my bookshelf here. This is just a little glimpse of how many leadership books there are. There's tons of conferences, there's podcasts. Like, content is not the problem when it comes to effective leadership. It's the context. And so today we're going to dive into the weeds and show practical steps for how you and I have our one-on-ones inside of Leadr. And I just want to encourage you guys, as you're listening, write down those questions, go ahead and throw them. You have two options in the chat, which you're already doing a great job of. Hey, Kenny, good to see you. Or the Q&A box. So there's two options there, Q&A box and the chat. Carissa and I are going to be keeping our eye on those. If you don't mind, it would be really helpful as you're asking your questions in the chat box, you can click to everyone so that everybody can see what questions you're asking. Here's the deal. If you have a question, probably means that at least one other person out of the over 100 people that are on right now also have that question. So be courageous, throw it in there. And we can't wait to hear from you. I'm going to start by sharing a little bit of my story. I know some of you on the call today, but some of you are on meeting for the first time. And then Chris is going to share a little bit of her story. And then we're going to talk about what an effective one-on-one looks like. So a little bit about me. I'm Senior Vice President of Growth here at Leadr. Leadr started as a client of mine. I spent the last 10 years in the leadership space. 9 of those were at an executive search and staffing consulting company. So worked on things like, how do we help organizations hire the right people? How do we keep them on board once we hire them? How do we make sure they stick around for a while? And then succession planning, development. Those were a lot of the issues that I woke up every day thinking about and went to bed thinking about. And in that role, the majority of my job as VP of Marketing and Business Development at that organization was creating content to help leaders understand the best practices of building the best teams. Well, I started my own company in 2020, and Leadr became a client of mine. And within the first 3 months, I was just so captivated by the work that the team was doing at Leadr and so bought into the mission of developing 1 million leaders, and was really able to see how a software could help take all of that thought leadership and content that I'd worked on for 9 years and help leaders be consistent with it. That Leadr offered me a full-time job and I jumped in with 2 feet in March of last year. So it's been a little over a year that I've been full-time. And in that time, when I started, we were about 20 or so full-time employees. And now we're, I think, 113, Carissa, which is just so much fun. And also a weight of responsibility, as so many of you are feeling on the executive team here. It's so important to me at Leadr and our entire executive team that we really live out people development. If we're going to be a people development company and selling software to help organizations do that, we've got to do that really well as a team as well, which you'll see a little bit of that today of the lessons I've learned along the way. But what's really cool about this webinar today is that Carissa and I have actually known each other for several years. So I don't remember what year it was, Carissa, we're at Exponential Conference. Do you remember what year it was?
2018.
2018. We go way back to 2018. And I got an email from a woman named Carissa that said, "Hey, Holly, just started a new job. I want to pick your brain about marketing." So we got on a call, and then it wasn't until I guess a year after that we reconnected at another conference in Dallas. And then I'll let her take over the story from there of how we got reconnected at Leadr. But it's just so special to be able to get to work alongside you, Carissa. So if you'll kind of pick up from there of how we reconnected about Leadr and a little bit about your story and your journey to Leadr.
Yes. So Holly and I had reconnected at a conference, and we got to travel a conference circuit. And so when you get to serve the same clientele, you end up making friends with the other vendors and the other sponsors in those organizations. And I came from an incredible line of great leaders. I worked for a company right out of college called Crew. It was in the top 25 largest nonprofits in the world. And I went to NASCAR and got an incredible experience working for a $1 billion industry and really being at the best of the game. Another privilege of serving an organization that exclusively served nonprofit organizations. And that's where Holly and I were able to connect. When I transitioned out of that organization, it was a really hard transition for me. It was, you're doing really great, you're doing really great. And here's a bonus. This person said this about you. This client said this. Man, they love working with you. We love working with you, but this isn't working anymore. And it was a really hard goodbye. And so our relationship just abruptly ended. And then everything looked drastically different for me. What do I do next? And once you know Holly, you kind of have a best friend for life. And so after a few months of licking my wounds, I reached back out to her and I was just like, "Hey, I don't know what's out there next. Let's connect." Holly's super well connected. And I just thought we would just catch up as friends and see what's going on in each other's lives. Quickly, she was like, "Actually, I could use some help. How about you help me here at Leadr? Here's the contracting work that I need. I don't know what this looks like for us, but let's just try it." And it was about 6 weeks later before Holly said, "You have to join this team." And I was like, "You're right. I can't do anything else but join this team." So much like Holly, jumped in with 2 feet. And what's been so sweet about my journey here at Leadr is I was let go from an organization that I loved. I had really incredible people that cared about me. And then I went to an organization that I started contracting for, became a full-time employee. And my first full quarter as a full-time employee ended up being employee of the quarter. And I got promoted, and now the privilege of leading a team. And I get to speak to so many incredible organizational leaders like yourselves. And it's not just because Holly's a great leader. Yes, she is, but it's not unique to her. We have these 5 foundations, and because all of these 5 foundations are done consistently and we're executing them through our weekly one-on-ones, we're able to see the results of someone like me who went from being fired to leading an entire team within 9 months. And I wonder if there are people like you or people on your team that might be in the similar seat. Where could they be 9 months from now if they were consistently meeting with their leaders one-on-one?
I love hearing your story, Carissa. You're so kind to say that, I was a part of that journey, which I'm just honored to be a part of your story. But it's really the fact that you have owned your own growth and development, and our software being a part of you being able to own that, which we're going to show everybody today. And so you are one of the most incredible people that I know about receiving and craving feedback and then implementing it. And it's just a joy to be able to be your coach and your leader. And so your story is so powerful. And I hope that it inspires not only those who are on the call today who might be thinking about, I want to level up as a leader. How do I become a better leader and develop myself so that you can inspire them, but also for those of us that are leading teams and feel that weight of responsibility of how do we really develop those that report to us, the difference that we can make when we really pour intentionality and consistency into developing the people on our team. So what we want to go over today is how to have an effective one-on-one. And so when I think about a one-on-one, I know everybody here is at different parts of the journey in one-on-ones. We have some organizations that we work with who have never even heard of a one-on-one. This is a brand new concept for their organization. And then we have other customers who are already doing weekly consistent one-on-ones, and it's a regular part of their weekly rhythms as a team. So regardless of where you are, what I want you to take away from our time together today is that consistent one-on-ones directly contribute to your employee engagement. So Gallup tells us this, that the more check-ins that a manager has with their direct reports, the more engaged that person is. And so at Leadr, we believe that the one-on-one meeting is the most powerful leadership development tool that exists. But so often we're ill-equipped, or it gets pushed down to the bottom of our to-do list, or we're rescheduling them and not picking them back up, and it spirals from there. And so that one-on-one meeting is the number one thing that you can do to help engage and grow every single person on your team. So when we're thinking about what does an effective one-on-one look like, this is not a perfect formula, but the way that I break out my one-on-one with Carissa and every single person on my team is into 3. So typically our one-on-ones are about 45 minutes a week. Sometimes they're 30, sometimes they're an hour, but the time that we've really put on the calendar is about 45 minutes for an intentional weekly one-on-one. And what I want you to think about is spending the first third of that one-on-one meeting on care. Then the second third on development of that person, and the third on performance. So 1/3 care, 1/3 development, and 1/3 performance. Now, some weeks we spend half of the meeting on care. Some weeks we spend 3/4 of the meeting all on performance. But for the most part, what we want to be intentional about as a leader is that 1/3 care, 1/3 development, and 1/3 performance. So I'm going to share my screen and walk you through what this practically looks like in our weekly one-on-ones with Carissa and myself. But Carissa, the first thing I would love for you to share as I'm sharing my screen is just when you've experienced the intentionality of the consistent one-on-one, how has that changed your ability to be engaged as an employee?
Absolutely. I think there's a famous saying that what makes successful people different is that they do consistently what some people only do occasionally. And I think that's true of our own growth and development, especially when it comes to one-on-ones. And so I know that I can always have these 45 minutes every Thursday morning. You and I are going to connect. And I know that I have that there. And you'll be able to see through our collaborative experience that I can drop things in here. I can add things through here. And Holly will have my full undivided attention during this time. And that means more to me than anything else, knowing that I not only have a leader that cares about me, but wants to help me level up and is going to be honest with me. And I'm going to know exactly where I stand and I never have to second guess it.
That's awesome. Well, let's start with the 1/3 care. So the first thing that I want you to pay attention to here on the right side are 2 things. One, me and Carissa's relationship timeline. So this is key because I can go all the way back to the first one-on-one that we had, and I can see every interaction that Carissa and I have had through Leadr in our relationship together, working together. This is key, especially for people like me. I run really fast. I'm a high D on the disc. I'm an 8 on the Enneagram. And so I often, if it's not tracked, I have forgotten it. And so for Carissa and I to be able to go back and reference things that we talked about, not only last week, but months ago, is critical in my intentionality as a leader in making sure that Carissa feels heard and cared for. The second thing I want you to notice is the care card. This is my all-time favorite part of our Leadr tool. And now I don't know how I led without it. So what I want you to notice here is this is a constant reminder to me every time Carissa and I meet, whether it's on my cell phone and we're meeting at a coffee shop or whether we're on Zoom looking at our desktop screen, that I am reminded to stop, take a breath, and recenter on how Carissa is uniquely wired and gifted for her role as senior marketing manager. So because I move really fast and I'm in meetings all day, every day, it's often my inclination to just come into the meeting with a flurry, jump right in and start talking about our to-do list. But instead, what her care card being front and center to me reminds me of is that people are more important than projects. And so I've got right here Carissa's personality assessments. So I can be reminded of what does it look like to be an ESFJ? I'm an ENTJ, so I don't know what it's like to be an ESFJ. I can click on this and get real-time advice on how to lead this type. Again, this is the difference between managing and development, because I'm able to really dial in and go, okay, how is Carissa uniquely wired and gifted? And how can I coach her to achieve her goals in our one-on-one? And that's leading with care. I can also take notes that Carissa can't see. Like I can remind myself of what her dog's name is, which is Chipper, and that Adam is her husband, so that I can ask caring, intentional questions like, how's Adam doing? Rather than how's your husband doing? And then Carissa here has got her own bio and things that she wants our team to know about her that everybody on our team can see. And so this is what it looks like to really start with care, to recenter before we start jumping into her development and performance, to really be reminded of who Carissa is. The third thing I want you to notice is this recurring agenda item in our one-on-one agenda. So this is recurring. That's what this little circle means here, which is how are you doing balancing family life and leader life? Carissa is a mom of a toddler and is an awesome senior marketing manager here. As a wife, she's got a lot going on. She hosts like 3 things every week at her house. I don't know how she does it. So I want to make sure that I create space to be able to proactively ask Carissa to share whatever she feels comfortable with that week, so that as her leader, I can do what I can do to make sure that she's balancing and carrying those things well. So Carissa, how has the care card and this recurring agenda item at the top of our one-on-one helped you feel cared for?
Yes. Well, a little bit different take on this would be that I sit in a middle management position. So I report up to you, but I also have a team that I'm responsible for as well. And so as I hop back and forth between my meeting with you and then my teammates that I care for and lead, it's really helpful to be able to be reminded that they're a person, that they have different communication styles as well. And always be able to know that just because I'm cared for by you and we have these conversations, that it's a good reminder and a model for me to be able to lead my team with the same thing. And so we always stop. I hide my agenda item with a little eyeball piece there, just so that way it doesn't look like I forget every time to ask how they are, because as a 3 wing too, I just want to get to the point and move on towards our performance, because we can achieve those things.
Yeah, definitely. Yep. So, and the other thing that I really enjoy is you usually go in here and provide comments before our meeting. So like our meeting this week is on Thursday, but you've already gone in and kind of shared some thoughts about how you're traveling a lot. And so you're excited, but also feeling that pressure at the same time. And so I'm able to see that before we get into the meeting, so we can really spend time on having a fruitful conversation there in the care part of our one-on-one before we jump into development. So if you've got any questions about the care component of an effective one-on-one, drop them in the Q&A or the chat box. We'd love to hear from you about what you're thinking, and we'll be sure to get to those towards the end of our time together today. All right, after care, we want to make sure that we're spending time on intentional development in every single one-on-one. And so this looks different for every team member. So for Carissa, Carissa is currently in a women in leadership cohort that she's been in for about 6 months. And so we created, you can see this, we actually created it 9 months ago before she even started it, but we knew she was going to be jumping into it as a recurring agenda item in our one-on-one, because I want to make sure that it's so easy. I know I'm this way. I'll go through a coaching program or read a book and then be like, oh, that was great, but not take time to really reflect and apply those learnings to my day-to-day. And so we've got this recurring agenda item here where I want to hear from Carissa. Hey, what did you learn in your last meeting with Jenny and the women in leadership team? And how are you applying that to your role? And so again, here we've got comments where we're going throughout, like she just graduated, which is so exciting. And so we're able to really apply those learnings where she's not just consuming content, but she's actually applying it to her role. So Carissa, for you in your own development as my direct report, and then as you're leading your team, how has the development piece of having this recurring agenda item helped you in your own growth and development?
Yes. Well, Holly, because you know me, and the first thing that you read about my personal insights is I'm extroverted. So I really need to process externally. And it helps me to do that with other people, especially those that are just a step ahead of me or where I'm looking to get to. So that way I'm just not my own sounding board and trying to meet with just my peers or only trying to figure that out with the team that I lead. So it's really helpful to know that I can count on this time with you to be able to unpack some things. And then with the other women in leadership, share their thoughts and their experiences and kind of pack it together. And because Holly knows me so well, and we've been meeting every week and we've been walking through this, she's really able to help me apply what is most applicable to myself and my leadership style and what is coming up for me next.
Yeah, definitely. And did a real practical action item from there is one of the things that I asked you to do at the end of, and we've been talking about this for a couple months now, but at the end of the cohort, when you graduate, to send me a 1-page recap of your takeaways and how you're applying it in your role as a first-time manager. And so what I want you to see is that we've actually got an agenda item down here where Carissa has due next week to send that in to me. So it's front and center. We're not only just having the conversation around development, but there's an action item, a next step of her really owning that, that we can track her completion of that right here, all inside the same view inside of Leadr. And so that's one takeaway that I want to make sure people are seeing, because it can be, it's that balance as a leader, right? We're trying to balance the getting the job done and executing the mission versus the care and development of our people. And so we want to make sure that we're leaving space for these conversations, but we're also driving outcomes and actions. That's where we really have effective performance management that's an outcome of people development. And so that's one of the things I want you to see here of how we apply that. Now that you've graduated, Carissa, we're gonna have to come up with another development piece for you. That'll be a fun next conversation to have of what's next. The other part of development that I want you to see that I've got here is, again, as Carissa has shared, this is her first time leading a team professionally. And so every one-on-one, we have a question of how's it going leading Callie, who is her direct report. And so again, able to create space for Carissa to ask questions and receive coaching and verbalize, and just to make sure that I can be a sounding board for her and provide coaching and direction. So Carissa, you are so great at coming to our one-on-one with specific questions. How do you come up with the questions that you ask me when it comes to being a first-time manager? Because I'm actually seeing a couple questions around that in the chat of like, how do you lead up and come up with those questions that you ask me in owning your own development?
Oh my goodness. Well, they're real and they're vulnerable questions and they're real pain points that I'm walking through. And I think this week I wanted to learn from you as a middle manager. I receive a vision or a call to action. Like, this is the thing we want to get done. I sit in a strategy seat. So it's my job to kind of come up with how we're going to do it. How's it going to accomplish our mission and create the game plan to be able to enable my team to be able to execute. And so I really only am responsible for that, like personally responsible for that strategy piece. So anything with the idea relation or the execution of it, I just have to own all of it. But what am I doing when I'm not actually the one who's fully executing it, but I need to be responsible for all of the details in between, from the casting of vision down to my team to making sure all the tiny nuances are done without being a micromanager, but fully knowing what's going on at the same time. And that's a real tension that I am walking through right now when it comes to being able to enable and equip my team for their own development to be able to grow and take things off my plate and watch them soar.
Yes, that is the hardest part about leading, is leading up, leading down, and leading sideways. We talk about that a lot at Leadr, is how do you raise enough above the weeds to be able to work on strategy and vision, but also enough in the weeds where you can help your team be able to execute. And so We have a lot of conversations around that. But the fact that you are thinking that way and you add it there into our one-on-one agenda, that enables us to have really fruitful, intentional conversations around it so that it's not just in passing. We can come back to it every week, see progress, continue to talk about pain points, and really help you develop in that over time. So that's awesome. All right, so we've talked about 1/3 care now, and then we migrated into talking about development. And then now I want to talk to you about how we can focus our one-on-ones on performance. Because kind of, as I said, a lot of us either lean one way or the other. So on this spectrum of, executing the mission, getting the job done versus the care and development of our people, typically we're going to lean one way or the other naturally. So I tend to lean more on the executing the mission and getting the job done. I literally went to empathy school. That'll be for another webinar one day, to really work on the care and development side, and leading with empathy. But a lot of times I see a miss where leaders spend so much time on the coaching and development part that they leave out performance. And then that's where things like performance, like PIPs, performance improvement plans, or when we have to have those termination conversations, they become surprises. It's our job as the leader that there are no surprises when it comes to performance management. That is a part of effective people development, is performance management. And so in our one-on-ones, we want to make sure as the leader, we're creating space for us to have conversations around performance in projects, while at the same time, the individual contributor or our direct report feels ownership for that performance. So that's one of the things we talk about when it comes to one-on-ones. This is not my meeting as the SVP of growth. This is not just Carissa's meeting as the senior marketing manager. This is our meeting. And so the expectation is that we're both coming to this meeting with adding agenda items, being proactive, communicating effectively, and really owning what performance and winning looks like. So 2 things I want to point out in that is, number one, front and center, we've got Carissa's goals. What's cool about this is Carissa actually has a personal goal as well as a couple of professional goals. So every employee is a little different here, even at Leadr. Some put personal goals in there, some don't, but I really appreciate that Carissa has put a personal goal here. 75 Hard is a fitness, what do you call it? Like a competition or plan, Carissa? It's intense.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot. But it's neat that she's shared that with me as a goal so that I can ask her about, hey, how's 75 Hard going? I've heard it's really hard. How's it going? Getting that workout in every day. As well as, of course, 2 workouts a day. Yeah, that's really intense. As well as her professional goals that she's working on, like building a marketing onboarding plan and working on our agency partnerships, which are 2 big initiatives that she's owning for our team and our company. And so Carissa goes in and updates these on a regular basis. I, as her manager, have visibility into these goals right here within our one-on-one. And so I can see the action items that she's put on there, how she's tracking, and any updates that she shared. And so this, by Carissa owning her goals and her performance, when we get into the one-on-one, I don't have to ask because I can see how's it going. And so now the question isn't how our agency partnership's going, it's, hey, I noticed your update this week that you built out a demo instance in Union Coffee. Anything I can do to help remove any obstacles or bottlenecks there? How's the demo instance working for you? So the questions become a lot more intentional because she's already updated her goals throughout the week. The other thing I want you to notice is, again, back to the recurring agenda items. So any big initiatives or projects that we're working on a regular basis, we have a recurring agenda item for. So Leadr Table is an event that we do every 4 to 6 weeks here at Leadr. And so we're always talking about this in our one-on-one. We want to make sure that a week does not go by where we are not talking about the progress and bottlenecks or obstacles that we're facing around Leadr Table. Same for Culture Conference, which, by the way, is coming up in 3 weeks, cultureconference.org. It's free. Check it out. Same thing there. And then she and I can add throughout the week other things that come up. I've got Leadr up all day, every day. That was one of the questions in the chat was, how do you prepare for your one-on-one meetings? All day, every day. I've got my email, Leadr, my calendar, and Slack. Those are my 4 tools that I could not do my job without. So as I'm thinking of things, I'm adding them to our Leadr agenda so that they're ready to go when we jump in on Thursdays. So those are two examples of how we're creating space here intentionally to talk about Carissa's performance with projects or goals that she's working on. Carissa, what would you share as far as our one-on-one time around your performance?
Oh, well, it's never a surprise, right? Like I said early on, that I know exactly where I stand. I know how to come to the conversation. And like I had shared how things are going, I've got a lot going on. We are very busy. We're growing so quickly. I have a sweet little 2-year-old daughter. I have family commitments, and I serve my community. Like you said, I host a couple of groups in our home a couple nights a week. So very busy, but I know that I have this space to be able to come back to keep myself organized and updated and moving forward, and knowing exactly what's going to be expected of me every single time. And that's really helpful because I feel prepared. And when I had shared earlier with you that I heard a quote that when you're stressed, it's because you're not prepared. Like stressful feelings only come out of a lack of preparation. But when you're prepared, you feel the pressure, and pressure can actually propel you to greatness. And I've been holding on to that quote all week, which is why I had dropped it in and was like, this is impacting me. And I want to share this with you. And it was really sweet because then we got to share it with our team in one of our morning huddles later. Because you actually checked on our agenda before our meeting, and because like you keep it up regularly, and we're actively using this as a communication tool around the 3 things of care, development, and performance.
So good. And the other thing too that I want to make sure folks are seeing is, again, it's not just having a conversation about it, but it's also driving it to action. So down here again, we can have action items that are associated with any of those goals or agenda topics that we're working on. So here's another example. I actually created this one and assigned it to Carissa to check on how many registrants we have for Culture Conference. So now she knows she has that action item, she owns it, and she can run with that at the end of our one-on-one. It's really clear who's owning action at the end of that meeting. All right, so we've talked about the care, 1/3 care, which we leverage our care card here in our relationship timeline, as well as the very top of the agenda, holding space for us to make sure that we're providing, asking intentional questions to provide care for our teammates. Then we talked about migrating into development. And so this looks like not only part of Carissa's overall leadership development plan in the cohort that she's been a part of, but also practically, what has life been like leading someone this week, and providing space to make sure that we're discussing that. Then we migrate into performance, and that's through our goals, our recurring agenda items around projects, and then action items, so we can actually drive action from the conversations that we're having. The other thing that I wanted to point out too is our feedback and learning inside of Leadr. So one thing I want you to notice is I've not clicked out of what we're looking at here. Everything I've clicked has been a part of our one-on-one. That's one of my other favorite parts about our tool. So I want to show you an example of this. I actually assigned this content to Carissa, and she responded to it, and then we can add it to the one-on-one. So partnerships are something that she and I have been having a lot of conversations about. And so I assigned her a podcast and asked her 3 intentional questions about it. And so not only is it just me sending a piece of content into cyberspace, but she's actually responding, and then we're able to loop back in our one-on-one about these application questions. Same thing with feedback. So I gave a talk to our leadership team last Friday about personality assessments and sent a feedback request. Carissa responded to it, and now it's attached to our one-on-one. And so again, it's front and center, and we can dive in and really, I can see what she learned from that talk and ask questions about it to make sure that we're actually applying the learnings that we're receiving throughout the week. So hope that helps you kind of get a framework if one-on-ones are new to you, or maybe you've been doing one-on-ones for a long time and they just feel ineffective or stale. Hopefully this gives you a bit of a framework of 1/3 care, 1/3 development, and 1/3 performance as you lead your team. So Carissa, I would love, as I'm going to check out the chat and our Q&A, would love for you to share, as a new manager who started leading one-on-ones for the first time in March, I guess. You were leading one-on-ones for the first time. What have been your biggest learnings in making them as effective as possible as you've been growing in your own leadership?
Okay, well, I'm gonna have to give away my secret. Are you
All
okay?
right, let's do it.
In our Leadr tool, there's a thing called topic suggestions, and you can click on that and add those to your one-on-one. So we've broken them down and categorized them for ask a new hire
right
this
here.
question. Like all the ones curated by Leadr are just, there's secret weapons. And so how do I have a feedback conversation? I want to add that as a topic agenda. Or I have an employee that's hybrid. So what is that like for her with that tension of having a fully remote team? Or what does it look like with a new hire having those first several one-on-ones? I have used these to my advantage every single time, including like post 30-day check-in. Sweet Callie, she knows exactly what I'm doing, but those things were so helpful for me to be fully equipped to be able to ask really good questions and have good conversation starters. And then I also have our conversation cards that I use as well on a regular basis when I get stuck and I'm trying to keep things fresh and find a new way to get to know my team without asking the same repetitive questions.
That's so true, Carissa. Because the reality is that even if we've been leading one-on-ones for a long time, it's still hard. Like feedback conversations when we're giving areas of improvement or critical feedback are never easy. Even for someone who's been doing it a long time, it's not often something that we look forward to. And so to be able to have some fire starter questions here. So here's what that looks like. You literally just click the plus button and then it's going to automatically add to mine and Carissa's one-on-one. So right here, it jumps down and then I can make it invisible so that Carissa's not stressed out about it and sees it in our agenda and is like, what feedback is Holly going to give me 5 days from now? But this is a reminder to me in our one-on-one to say, hey, Carissa, are you open to some feedback? I'd love to help you reach your goal. And I noticed something last week I wanted to share with you. And then that just provides space to give me more confidence as the leader to bring up that conversation and then create a safe environment for her to receive that feedback. So great call on the topic suggestions. That is really helpful, especially to first-time managers or new managers for sure. All right, well, I'm gonna jump in. We've got some awesome questions coming in. One person said, empathy school, is that a thing? Yes, it is. And I have been talking to the organization that does it, that they should do it for businesses. It's really meant for educators. That's what I attended. It was me and a bunch of teachers. And I'm like, you guys have got to do this for businesses. But I would start with Brene Brown's books. She's the best at really understanding how we can use empathy in the workplace to help lead our teams better for sure. Okay, so Andrew asked, how do you create content for the agenda, especially after you've been meeting for a while? How do you keep the content relevant and helpful to your team? So Andrew, Carissa just answered this so well with our topic suggestions or our conversation cards that are a fun resource. We've actually got a free download of our conversation cards that our team can put in the chat here for you to download. We use this for our marketing team. My team is a team of 5. We have a huddle every morning at 8:15 where we have one of our questions from the conversation cards and we all answer them. So it recenters us on our why and helps us focus at the beginning of every morning. But the other thing too, Andrew, that I would encourage you is when you're asking questions that are open-ended and really thoughtful, like how are you doing balancing family and Leadr or whatever your organization is, this really, you're going to be surprised at what you're going to learn when you just ask those big questions and then listen. And so I never get bored when I ask those questions and get to sit back and listen to my team. And a lot of times what I'm doing is listening for what they're not saying. And that sparks additional questions for me as I'm really helping, making sure that they're thriving in their role and then in general in life as much as I can. All right. One of my favorite questions, I get this one often, Carissa. Giovanni says, meeting one-on-one weekly is not overkill. Will it vary between employees? So actually, I'm going to have you answer this first. As the receiver of weekly one-on-ones, what do you think is a healthy cadence for regular one-on-one meetings?
Yeah, well, like I shared earlier, this is my favorite meeting of the entire week. I look forward to this time because we're moving quickly and we've got so much going on that I know I have this 45 minutes to count on every single time to be able to talk to you about how I'm doing personally, how I'm doing as a leader, how I think I'm measuring up in my own performance and the tasks and things that I'm responsible for. And I just love getting to learn and sit at your feet. So for the people that might feel like it's overkill, don't underestimate how much your team really values that time with you. And I realized that as a new leader myself, my team is looking to me for stability, for consistency, for direction and clarity, and only I can provide that for them.
That is really good. It's easy for us as leaders who are in meetings every day to feel that way. Like, isn't that overkill? Just another meeting. But one thing that we have to realize is often, especially individual contributors, they're not in as many meetings. And so they really do look forward to that time. I've been in that situation before where I sat down for our one-on-one and my boss never showed up. And that is so frustrating when you're on the receiving side of that. It can often make you feel like a project or something on their calendar was more important than you. And so to me, I think, and I'm not the one that said this, it might've been, I think it was Marcus Buckingham. Ooh, I need to know that, I should know this, but organizations move at the speed of trust. Maybe it was Jocko. Anyway, I'll look it up. But if we're not meeting weekly, we're gonna, I believe we as leaders will become the bottleneck, and we are prohibiting our team from growth because they desire check-ins more than you think they do. There's a stat, Generation Z, 60%, this is a new stat, I think it was on Forbes, 60% of Generation Z wants at least a weekly, if not daily, check-in with their manager. And that doesn't mean 45 minutes every day, but that means an intentional check-in. How are you doing? How can I help? Even if you ask those two questions on a regular basis, I think you're going to see a huge difference in your team engagement. All right. Next question, another one of my favorites. Kathy says, how many direct reports is reasonable to do one-on-ones with? So I took this from, I believe it was Jason Fried was who I heard this from. He is the CEO and founder of Basecamp. And he said that if you cannot share, and I'll give you an extra large, okay? If you can't share an extra large pizza with your team, then you have too many direct reports. So the way to think about it is, if you have more, if you're feeling like there is no way I can meet weekly with my direct reports, you probably have too many. And so I want to challenge you to think about, how are you effectively building the leadership pipeline on your team? Give away responsibility just before you think the person's ready, because they will likely rise to the occasion, and help relieve yourself from having too many direct reports. I gave one of our customers a really hard time when he came on board with Leadr. He had like 17 direct reports. And I was like, Jeff, no, you cannot be an effective leader without many direct reports. I'm very excited to say that now he only has, I think he's down to like 7 or 8, which I still think is too many, but that's a much better than 17. So Kathy, it's different for every leader. Every leader has a different, what I call span of care. For me, that's no more than 5. Like, I just know that more than 5 direct reports, my direct reports are not going to get the best of me. And it's going to be, it's going to hurt myself and all of the people that are reporting to me and my greater team if I have more than about 5 direct reports. There might be seasons where I can go more than that. But it's really, you need to decide what is your span of care. I heard a leader recently tell me that one of their direct reports said, hey, I feel like I'm getting your leftovers, which kudos to that team member for speaking up and saying that. But that should raise the alarm bells as a leader. Maybe I have too many direct reports and I really need to look at how I'm delegating responsibility down the org chart. So a little bit of a soapbox for me, but hopefully that's encouraging to you as you're leading. All right. Judy asks, do you have suggestions for engaging employees that seem reluctant about this process? So Carissa, I'll actually hand it over to you. How would you, as the things that you've been learning as you're leading a team for the first time, how would you answer that question for Judy?
Yes. So as much as we want our teammates to own their own care and development, at the end of the day, I'm the leader. And it is my responsibility to help engage and grow my team. It starts with me. And so if my meetings aren't effective, if they're not working, then it's it's me. And so I need to figure out, how do I help my team get excited about this? How do I help show them, demonstrate, model what it looks like to own their care and development? What questions can I start asking when it comes to that? And I've been asking two new questions recently to my teammate, Callie, as she's trying to figure out what her best skill set is and her strengths. And so I've asked her, what have you done at work this week that made you feel alive? Like, let's talk about it. And then what did you do outside of work that made you feel alive? And so that way we can really kind of help dig into that. And it's spurred some really fun conversations. And I think she's still kind of mulling over a little bit more in her head, but I would say get creative and find ways that truly engage them, which is why the care card is so important, because each person is an individual. So what works for one teammate isn't going to work for the other.
That's really good. Again, that goes back to coaching. Coaching is all about, it's going to be different for every team member. And so those two questions are really good for you to dig in on personalizing that coaching to them. So Amanda asked kind of a technical question. Are action items going to have a place for questions? We finish meetings and action items are assigned and there isn't a place to ask questions. Amanda, great question. We're actually talking about, just had a meeting this last week of how can we potentially have comments on action items or have a place for you to ask questions. But I would also make sure that before you leave that meeting, you create, maybe it's a recurring agenda item that says, any questions? Does everyone have clarity? I have a recurring agenda item, one of my other direct reports, that says, how can I provide clarity for you this week? And it's a recurring agenda item because I know clarity is really important to that team member. So for now, I would encourage you to make sure that you don't leave that meeting without without creating space for people to ask questions and get clarity. And of course, we're going to have questions afterwards, but make sure there's an owner of the meeting that people can go back to and ask questions for next steps if they have additional questions after the meeting. All right, let's see. How do you manage goal tracking in the midst of short-term requests / things that get added? Well, that's one of the things I love about a tool that's dynamic like this, is it's not set in stone. And so we can go in and add things as they come up, add action items, retool the dates if things pivot and change. One of the things we talk about on our team is that it's not the plan that is the most important, it's the planning process that is critical. Because within that plan, then we have a direction, then we can pivot and move within that plan. So I actually really love that about the fact that it's a collaborative tool, is we can change the plan as things are added or changed. All right, we have so many good questions. I'm going to keep going. Drinking from a fire hose here. Joseph says, do you use a weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual questions? Okay, I think he's saying, do you have weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annual questions recurring for consistency? New questions each time, or a combination? Or do you approach one-on-ones more than an ongoing perspective? So Joseph, the question here, I think the question behind the question is, in different seasons of reflection, how do you use Leadr and one-on-ones to really make sure that you're tracking those things? So two things. One, our reviews module is for performance reviews. And so here at Leadr, every organization is different. We do 2 reviews a year. And what those reviews should be are a memorialization of those conversations that we've already had. So one example, I'll share my screen again and show you me and Carissa's. This little bookmark icon right here, that is, I've bookmarked that agenda item for Carissa's review. So she knows that in her performance review coming up, actually, I think next month, Carissa, we're going to be talking about how she's doing balancing family and leader life, because that impacts her role of how she's thriving both inside and outside of work. And so I would encourage you to bookmark those items throughout. Here's another one, leader table. That's a big KPI for Carissa. So she knows that we're going to be talking about that in her performance review. And then over in our reviews module is where we capture that every 6 months. You can do more if you want, but I recommend you have at least 2 reviews on an annual basis, if not 3, to really be able to capture the milestones along the way, and then also make a game plan for looking ahead for the next quarter or 6 months. Anything you would add to that, Carissa, from your end on the receiving end of one-on-ones and reviews?
Yes, we actually had a very different type of review at the end of last year, and it was a prep conversation for promotion. And you used an open-ended review of, hey, would anybody on our team be surprised? What pain points are you experiencing? How would your teammates describe you? And based off of that description, what would need to change if you started leading them? And it was a really fun conversation that you and I got to have through the reviews module that we added to our next one-on-one. And at the end of that, you're like, great, I'm glad we're on the same page because I'd like to promote you to a senior marketing manager and you're going to start leading a team in the new year. And that was really, really helpful and really insightful for me to be able to have that with you.
Oh, that's awesome. I appreciate that feedback. That's exciting. Danielle said something to me and you. This is cool and hopefully helpful to anybody else that's leading Generation Z. She said, my Gen Z new onboards have all thrived with a 15-minute start of the day check-in for their first few weeks. Great feedback, Danielle. The data aligns with that. So encouragement to anyone who's leading Generation Z or looking for ways to more creatively lead that generation. Allison asks, Carissa, this is a good one for you. How can a team member evaluate if something can wait till the one-on-one or if they should reach out outside of the regular meeting time? Do you have a measurement for how you use to evaluate that?
Yes, I always default to Leadr for the most part, unless it's a really quick, I need a response, here's a Slack. If it's very detailed and a little bit more, then I typically write a long email or a recap for you. Or you used to have an agenda item when we were both traveling and on the road and kind of missing each other a little bit. What updates do you have for me? Not any updates, what updates do you have for me? And it was a place that invited me because it based off the question, there's an expectation that you should have updates for me, what those look like. And those just more of like FYIs for you. And then we were kind of able to unpack them a little bit as needed. But some of those had this conversation, this is how it went, here's this conversation, and there was no real action item. So if you need an immediate response from me, from my boss, then usually it's a Slack thing. If it's a recap, it's an email. If it's an FYI, it's usually Leadr.
That's awesome. Great formula to use there, Carissa. I'm going to repeat that just because you said that fast, but it was so good. So if it's an FYI goes in Leadr, like here's what I want you to know. If it's a recap of something that's important, or we want to make sure we're aligned on the decisions that were made, that is typically via email. And if it's a, hey, I need your response ASAP, especially working remotely, that is in Slack. So that's a great formula to use. I think to the question, make sure that you set those expectations. Your employees can't read your mind. So it's important that you're clear about those expectations of how you want to be best communicated with, so that you can make sure that they're getting your best from you. Brian asks, we are doing one-on-ones every other week. They seem to go more towards projects and things the employee is working on. Should the one-on-one be used for this, or is there another kind of meeting? So Brian, I would say as much as possible to set that expectation that, hey, in our one-on-one, we're going to be talking about care, development, and then performance and projects. If you're feeling like your one-on-ones are leaning too much on projects and performance, that might be an indication that there's a lack of clarity about what the employee owns. So if you're finding that you're having to provide more coaching or answer questions than you feel like you should be, I would encourage you to reflect on, have you given really clear guidance on what winning looks like with this project? Because that's what I usually do when I'm like, okay, why is, for example, with Carissa, I do this to Carissa all the time. I'm putting you on the spot, Carissa. Carissa will ask me a question like, hey, what should we do about this? And I'll say, what do you think we should do? Because I want to help coach her in making decisions and not just coming to me for the answer. And so that's something that I'll often do. I'll make a fun hashtag out of it, like coaching moment with Holly, so that she knows it's not like a serious, performance conversation of Carissa, you should know the answer. It's more of me just helping coach her to actually make the decision and guide her along. We've had a couple questions here of folks who are saying, what if my supervisor or my leadership does not lead this way? I crave this. Somebody said, I really desire this from my supervisor. So I would encourage you to take initiative by, if you don't have Leadr, just start somewhere, even if it's a proactive email where before the one-on-one meeting, or maybe you schedule a one-on-one and say, I'll just take Matt, my boss, for example. Hey, Matt, I've been thinking a lot about how I can level up in my own roles and responsibility here. And so I would like to schedule a weekly or choose bi-weekly if you feel like that's better for them, a one-on-one of 30 minutes. And I've dropped one on your calendar for Thursday at 2 o'clock. And here are the 5 agenda items that I would like to talk about. So what you're doing is you're taking initiative by showing them how you want to be led. I think that's a really effective way to lead up. Hopefully that they will be receptive to that and go, wow, this is awesome that, Carissa's coming to me with a proactive communication about what she wants to talk to me about. And then over time, you can start introducing what would it look like for us to use a tool like Leadr where we could be collaborative and I could track all of this in one place over time. And so you could see my growth and development across the team. So that would be my encouragement to you, is to take initiative and show them the leadership that you desire to be led with. All right. Let's see. I'm still working in the chat. Okay, perfect. Krista, you answered that one. Now I'm going to go over to Q&A. We got 11 over here in Q&A. I'm going to see. Okay, Mitzi, this is a good one. Mitzi just asked, how do you manage your time to prepare for your one-on-ones? So again, I have Leadr up all the time on my desktop during the day, and then also people development in your pocket. So I've got on my iPhone, I'll show you what it looks like right here on my phone screen. This is the Leadr mobile experience right here that I have on my screen. So for me, I don't know if you're wired like me, but usually all the things I want to talk to Carissa or Kristen about come to me like at 10 p.m. as I'm going to bed. And so right here on my phone, as I'm, laying in bed, I can just pull up our agenda and add things as they come to mind. And so for me, that's what prepping for the one-on-one looks like. I don't have an intentional time carved out because I'm just doing it regularly throughout the day. But I do know that other executive leaders on my team have time scheduled as a calendar block on their calendar to prepare for their one-on-ones that are coming up that week. So I think it kind of depends on how you're wired. The goal is be intentional, whether you're doing it in real time or you're calendar blocking. It's about you being intentional to prepare for those one-on-ones. And then also make the expectation, you have to communicate as a leader. Hey, Carissa, my expectation is that you come to our one-on-ones prepared with agenda items added. This is our meeting. We have a leadership development program here at Leadr called Leadr U, where they set up team members that are in Leadr U set up coffee meetings with the executive team. And if I go in and they don't have any agenda items added, I will cancel the meeting and that's the expectation that the leader of Leadr U has said, that you've got to be prepared for those meetings or the executive will cancel it. So we have to communicate those expectations so our team can win. Let's see, we are almost at time, so I want to make sure we're getting to everybody. Oh, good. Okay. Jack says, any suggestions if you have 8+ direct reports? Do you ever separate meetings to focus on care and development and then another on performance? So I would say as much as you can, try to do a third, a third, a third. But if that team member needs more care and development that week, then definitely schedule an additional time to focus on performance. What you don't want to do is make sure that you're skipping weeks where you're not talking about performance, because then surprises come up. So we want to make sure as much as possible we can capture that in the one-on-one. Oh, Kenny, I love this question. I work remotely, so this one means a lot to me. When in a one-on-one face-to-face, what advice do you have on how do you type notes in Leadr while trying to keep the meeting personal and keeping eye contact? So one thing that you can do is, whether you have your phone or your iPad or your computer, have it set to the side, ask the question, hey, Chris, I want to make sure I'm following the questions that you have today. So the first one is, let's talk about women in leadership. Then put it to the side, you're listening, and then say, that's really good. Hey, I want to take a couple notes before we move on to the next question so I can make sure that I really have captured what we talked about. And then just take a couple seconds, jot down some notes, have your team member do the same thing, and that'll become a natural occurrence. Again, they're going to model the behavior that they see in you. And so by you stopping and taking a couple notes, that communicates to your team member that you're hearing them and what they're saying means so much to you that you're going to write it down. So I wouldn't worry as much about, am I being fully present? That shows that you're being fully present and that you're reflective listening by taking notes. So, All right, Chris, I think we did it. I think we covered the majority of the questions. Great questions, everyone. We're so glad that you joined us. Again, the fact that you were a part of this today means that you want to level up in your own leadership. Yes, we will send out the recording later this afternoon or tomorrow morning after it processes. If you are not yet a Leadr customer, we would invite you to sign up this month. So we have an incredible new part of our tool called Leadr Insights that was rolled out that we'd love to show you. And if you're already a Leadr customer, we would love to show you Leadr Insights. So feel free to reach out to your customer success manager or to our team or on our website. We are here to help you however we can as you lead better. Carissa, thanks for your time today. And it's just a joy to be a part of your leadership journey.
Thanks for having me, Holly.
Bye, everybody.